Welcome to the Epic Score Podcast. I'm your host, Gabe Shadid. The creative industry has many sides to it. Of course, the obvious ones are actors, musicians, visual creators. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of executive and administration work. And I'm eager to share those journeys with you as well because they can be great careers. Some people, like our guest today, love the creative industry and have spent an entire career in it, but not on the creative side. My interview this week is with Alex Black. Currently, he serves as the CEO to the Sonoton Music Library, which is considered to be the largest privately owned production music library in the world. Alex had a strong desire to be in the music industry, but he was not a musician or composer. His path, which we're going to dig into today, was on the executive side. But his journey started with making tea for pop stars in music studios. How did he go from that start to at one point being EMI's Global Director for Production Music? We're about to find out. I'd like to thank Wildwood Picture and Sound for providing one of their mix rooms for our chat. I really appreciate their support. And I'll see you next week back here in the studio, and we'll continue our journey towards Epic Score. I'm here with Alex Black today. I'm very excited. Alex is the CEO of Sonoton. Sonoton is largely recognized as the largest independently owned music library in the world. And prior to that, Alex was the global director of EMI's production music. And prior to that, you did a similar job for Boosey & Hawkes. Boosey & Hawkes is a very large publisher in the UK. And so Alex has had a very long run. He's been very influential in the production music world. For viewers and listeners that are new that don't know what production music is or library music, artists make music at times just for the purposes of licensing. They're not trying to sell an album. They're not trying to put on a live concert with this particular music. What we have is music where the copyrights, the recordings, the intellectual property is all wrapped up, and it's easy for a client to license it. It's reasonable in cost. It can go quickly. Our industry moves at a very quick rate, and library music facilitates that. So that's what the music library world is, and Alex has been all over and very influential in that world. So I'm very excited to sit here with you today. You've carved out some time. You came from Europe, and I know you have a million meetings, and so thank you for that.
No, I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, well, we've known each other a long time.
Yeah, no, a very long time.
Yeah.
I think my journey in this part of the industry is music publishing, and specifically music for library music's sake, is every step of the way you've been there, you've been present. You know, we represented you at Boosey & Hawkes.
Boosey & Hawkes.
Represented you at EMI, and now we've got you again at Sonoton. So,
and if I may interrupt for just a second, Sonoton has a special spot in my heart because in 1997 I started my first professional commercial library music for Sonoton. It was the first time, and so for me to have that journey all the way back then, and then now today, Epic Score is in Germany and Austria with Sonoton. It's just been a fun, interesting journey.
Yeah.
And I've been very thankful for it.
Well, you've been in the industry longer than I have. I mean, this is, if you're dating yourself back to 97,
yeah.
You see, because we talked about this a little bit anyway, but my journey, I was in recording studios making tea for pop stars.
This is your beginning.
This is my beginning.
There you go.
So in the early 90s, I was working for Trevor Horn in recording studios, training to be a sound engineer. So my journey into production music, into library music was much later, because I did the whole Trevor thing and studio thing, and then I moved into a world where I started being a record promoter. And I did that for kind of 7 years. So I kind of go in 7 year cycles with my career. So
do you get the itch, that 7-year itch?
It's a subconscious thing. It's never a conscious thought. But there's a certain time in every stage of my career where it's been like, yeah, I've kind of achieved what I wanted to achieve, and what's next. Yeah. So I worked around the studio game for about that period of time, and then in about 97 I started a PR company sending out records to DJs. So this predates MP3s. and Napster. So we were sending out black discs, vinyl records to electronic DJs around the world and promoting music, other people's music. And my route into this world came because of a guy called Edwin Cox, who runs West One Music, which is another well-known library music company. And Edwin and I used to work in the same studio. So we knew each other from those days.
Was he a sound engineer?
He was working for a couple of pop music producers as their assistant, and Pro Tools operator. And so we knew each other from then. And fast forward 6-7 years, I'm running my PR company, and Edwin's in the library music world, and he phones me up and asks me if I would produce some music for him, or if I would get my client base, which is at Cool Electronic Music Producers, to produce some music for the library. And the first time he called, I was busy. We were we were doing some great stuff at the time. We were promoting Radiohead and Carl Cox and LTJ Bookham and some. We were in the eye of the storm and really working flat out. And I didn't really have the bandwidth to kind of work out the opportunity that Ed was offering me.
Right.
And to my good fortune, a couple of years later, he phoned me again, and he had just founded West One with his business partners and offered the opportunity again. And at that point, Napster had started, the MP3s, the Pioneer CDJs, this kind of perfect storm was brewing, and DJs didn't need vinyl anymore. They could DJ from CD, they could transfer files. The ecosystem around how you promote records fundamentally changed. Right. So I had a little bit more time on my hands, and I took the opportunity and I started producing for West One whilst running my PR company. And we were putting together, albums with my clientele, producing the music. And then a chain of events happened where I ended up being offered a job at Boozy and Hawks to go in as a music producer. So I went in first of all as music producer. So, but that I call that my kind of third career.
And was the music and was the music producing for library production music, or you were actually producing artists?
No, that job went Boozy and Hawks. It was going to be the producer of the music library.
There you go.
So there was a guy who was Ed's partner in West One who had moved back to Boozy and Hawks because they were there. Both of them were there before West One started. So Mike went back to Boozy and Hawks, needed a producer, offered me the job. And at that point, the whole MP3 thing for record promotion, really, we were kind of struggling. So it felt like the right time to try something new.
Try something else. Adapt, evolve, change direction.
But this is like I always say this is like my third career in music. I fell into music publishing. Yeah. And purely kind of by accident. And I was producing for Boozy, and then only about a year later, the opportunity came about to actually run the department. Mm-hmm. And because I had 7 or 8 years experience running my own company, and prior to that had 7 years experience in recording studios, it was kind of, I got the nod, I got the job to run the whole department for Boozy and Hawks.
Right. As I recall, Michael Shaw was only there for about a year after, because Michael Shaw actually pursued me and said, "Hey, we want Epic Score," and I was like, "Who are you?" I didn't know. And then somebody, maybe Gerhard or somebody said, "Oh, Michael is an incredible promoter, and you should definitely go with him." And I was like, "Okay." And then a year later, he was gone, and I was like, "Oh."
Well, exactly.
And then you stepped in,
and I inherited the relationship. So Mike Mike brought me into the company, and then some stuff happened, and he decided he was going to go and do something else, and it was like great, it worked out pretty well.
That's how these opportunities come about, especially when people leave, somebody, hey, I can fill the shoes.
You got to take your opportunities. I think, I would say maybe it's interesting for people watching, that, when I went to college, I went to art college. I am not a musician. I went to art college, DJ'd my way through art college, but
you were a DJ.
I studied graphic design.
Oh.
Right. So I was a graphic design student,
All right.
but passionate about music and running little nightclubs and playing records whenever I could. And then it was only, and when I left college, I was like, well, I don't really fancy being a graphic designer. I didn't think I was good enough. And also I didn't really it wasn't a job I wanted to pursue. And I kind of fell into recording studios because I was passionate about music, but I don't know how to make music. And I thought, well, okay, if I don't know how to make music, why don't I go to where music is made and see what it's all about? So.
Did you enjoy producing?
Yeah, well, I mean, those days I enjoyed making tea.
Fair enough.
And, running around and doing errands and striping tape and, all of that style and learning how to engineer, but the thing I most learned, in those studio days, we were dealing with the big pop stars of the time, and it was all very high caliber, people coming through, and the engineers were the best engineers in the world, and all of that. And so my biggest takeaway from that time was how to operate in a creative environment and how you adjust the way you respond depending on the artist and the ego and what is needed. Right, and that's
Absolutely.
not just the artist; that's everyone involved. Management that come in, the record label people that come in, the entourage, everything. You have to kind of manage. Okay, there's a completely different kind of personality coming through the door. How do I deal with that and make them comfortable and get from a jobbing studio point of view, from a production, from the engineering team in those kind of gun for hire studios where people coming through every day. You have to be a chameleon. You have to work out how to get the best out of each creative force coming through the door.
Absolutely. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different way of working. Everybody has different demands. Yeah. And so you can't approach it with one like this, well, this is how I do it. Oh yeah, well, nobody cares about that.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, that's in that period, that was my biggest takeaway. But like every step of my career, from being a graphic design student and like leaving and going, I don't really want to do that. Did I just waste my time? And then doing studio stuff, and then kind of at one point going, I'm with the elite people and I'm not really elite at this. My heart's not in it, right? And then you kind of go, oh, maybe I've just wasted my time again. And then the same with my own company, with my record promotion company. It was like halfway through, I was kind of like, music promotion is being a salesperson. You've got a product, a release, and you've got to convince journalists and radio DJs to play it. Absolutely. And write about it, right? You're selling this, and I can do it, but I didn't really enjoy that. And I was so when I fell into the world of music publishing and library music publishing, I was kind of that was like, design, studio, PR, all kind of going, have I just wasted my time? And then, but the wonderful thing about it, right, is at that point, it kind of all came together. And so, hang on a minute. So we produce music that we have. At that time, we were making CDs still. It was, streaming was there, but it wasn't. Right. So we were still we were making a product, and it was a CD. So you had to design a cover. And you have to produce the music, design a cover, and then go and sell it and market it, right? And it was like suddenly this moment of going, oh, well, maybe I've landed. Maybe all of that stuff wasn't a waste of time because I've got design sensibility, I've got ears.
Right. Production sensibility. And whilst I'm not the best at any of these things, I know enough about all of these things to know what makes in theory, what makes a good product, right? Right.
And then you kind of go, okay, so when you get into a position of management and it's your responsibility to really make the money and manage a team, then the fun bit, the creative bit is building a team of experts in those different areas. Yeah. But, being knowledgeable in all of those areas, but not necessarily the expert I became comfortable with that being my position.
There's a delegation aspect. I guess you have to become adept at or comfortable with, like, okay, I'm going to tell that person to do that. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, my boss at the time, John Minch, who ran Boozy and Hawks, which then became Imark Production Music because it was bought by a Dutch investment fund, and then it became Concord, but I'd left by then, and now it's Cavendish Music. But my boss at the time, John Minch, when I made that step into management from being a producer, he wanted to do a favor for a friend or something who was a management coach, an executive coach. And he said, do you fancy talking to this lady for a few sessions? And I was like, yeah, do you know what? Always helpful to help strengthen areas in your thought process and have someone you can bounce off, that's paid to listen and smile and give you some kind of sound advice, right?
It's that outside perspective that sometimes you have a hard time identifying in yourself, right?
Yeah. And I think I had 3 sessions with this lady, and one of the things was like, wow, I can do that, but I'm not the best at it. I can do that, but I'm not the best of it. But so-and-so who's, Ian, who's been with me now for 30 years, is one of the best sound engineers and producers that I saw we worked together at Trevor's at the studio, and he's one of the best in the industry, hands down. And he went off and had an amazing career. When I was going into record promotion, he went off and worked with a producer called William Orbit, and they did the whole Madonna, all that period of William Orbit's career where he was Madonna, U2, Blur, everything. And Ian was there, and Ian had worked with Radiohead and worked with loads of great people. He's an incredible engineer. And I had the good fortune that he was ready to get out of pop music at the time when I was looking to build a team at Boozy, and he was ready to come in and have a normal life and a 9-to-5 job.
9 to 5, which
being an engineer, but being an engineer in a more kind of
Right.
corporate, kind of like
Exactly.
not rock and roll environment.
Right. That's right.
And I was saying to this coach, I was like, well, I'm not the best at any of these things. And she was the one who helped me go, if you build a team of experts, you don't need to be the expert in anything. You just need to be able to see the bigger picture and bring everyone together to work in a way you need them to work. And that was a game changer for me in terms of going, okay, I am now comfortable with what I can contribute within running this business. And what I need to do is bring in the people I think are really good at selling, people I think are really good at making music. And if I can do that, then I'm comfortable with my part in it in terms of connecting the dots and getting everything else working and getting the wider environment working the way we want it to work. And that's and that helped me change my view on what creativity was. So then if you think about, if you've worked and existed in a very creative environment like a recording studio, but you're not the creative, right? You start to kind of go, but you're naturally a kind of creative person, right? You're kind of like, oh, where's my place? Where's my place? And I actually find nerdily great joy in the creativity of running a business, right? Other people can be the truly creatives making the music but navigating the ship and dealing with the obstacles that we all come across. We've come wave after wave of challenges within, there's great opportunity within the shift in digital media and the online and all of that. But at the same time, it's really shaken the foundations of what was a business that had been pretty stable for 30, 40 years.
Exactly.
And, you need, but to find that creativity and how do we navigate these choppy waters is what gets me up every day and gets me to work, right?
This is what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, well,
Now, how did you transition from Boozy to EMI?
Well, I mean, I suppose I've had a lot of good fortune.
Fair enough.
I remember this. I remember at the time my PR company was struggling. I remember distinctly kind of going to my network of people, including Mike Shaw, going, yeah, I'm not so sure I'm going to do this for very much longer. I'm looking for what's next, right? And you kind of seed, I talk about seeding quite a lot recently, but you kind of seed that idea of like, well, who sensed the market with a few friends in different areas of the business to kind of gauge, well, where should I go next and what should I do? But you're also planting a seed of, I'm open to an opportunity, right? And this almost predates LinkedIn, but certainly predates other social medias and whatever. So I was at Boozy, and I was working a lot with the PRS, which is the Performing Rights Organisation in the UK. Most countries around the world have PROs that manage performing rights and mechanical rights. And I was kind of in these industry meetings where we were advising people, the licensing people at the PRS and stuff. So I was in the production music one, but my boss, John, had also put me in the commercial one because he wanted a voice on that commercial committee that could talk about production music and library music. So he put me in that meeting, and there was some issue, I can't remember what it was now, but there was something, and I was in a room with, probably 30 other serious publishers, kind of quite industry bigwigs and whatever, and something was being discussed, and I had an opinion about it, but to be honest, I was a little timid and a little bit kind of unsure myself, and I didn't know whether I wanted to speak up in this in this environment. So afterwards, I sent the chair of that meeting a note saying, that topic, actually, this is what I think about it. And he came back and said, I like what you're thinking. Why don't you come and work in this? We're going to do these breakout meetings. Why don't you come and contribute to those meetings?
Nice.
So I went, and this is about advising about some licensing scheme for broadcasters or whatever. And so I went to a series of meetings and got to know some other kind of serious players in publishing. And, I was kind of finding my voice, as it were. And then fast forward 6 months, and the guy that chaired the meeting was a guy called William Booth, and he had left the PRS and gone back to Sony. He had worked at Sony before, and he went to PRS, and then he went back to Sony to be number 2 in the UK, next to a guy called Guy Moot. And they needed someone to come and run their library. And he gave me the call and said, look, would you fancy coming and meeting Guy and talking about a job opportunity?
So they flat out just offered it to you almost out of the blue.
The opportunity to go and meet Guy and talk about the potential of running the business was not solicited.
Not solicited.
And we had a few meetings, we got on, I got the job.
Wow.
And it's and I tell you what, that lesson of, I suppose, that you got to sometimes put yourself out there and take a risk.
Yes.
And so the seeding, when I talked to Mike Shaw about going, I want to look at I think I'm winding down my business. I want to look and that came out of the blue. But then but it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't stuck my neck out and written that note to William to say, I think this about that. If I had just kind of gone, I think that, but I'm not going to say anything, or I'm busy, if I hadn't written that email, I wouldn't have got the job.
You wouldn't have gotten on his radar, in essence, right?
Yeah.
And you got on his radar, and then 6 months later, look what happens.
Yeah, basically.
And did you come in as the global director for EMI?
Yeah.
That was it. You came straight in at that echelon, at that level. Wow.
Yeah, I went in to run what became EMI Production Music. It was KPM, the world-famous catalogue. And I went in, but the actual job was with Sony, because by that point, Sony controlled EMI, managed EMI music publishing. So I went in as an EMI employee to run a specific EMI part of the business. Right. But I'm in the Sony kind of management team, if you like. And having had a lot of time all my career in the independent sector, it was eye-opening that going into that Sony Music Publishing is the largest music publisher in the world, and incredible to go in that management team in the UK, but also the international team was based in the UK as well, and then the American team is obviously based in America. So, but Marty Bendir was the head of Sony Music Publishing at the time, and I had access to him when needed or when required, and I had access to the tier below of management, and just the minds in that environment, and the door, every door is open to you in the majors. That's the biggest change between an independent company, you can be knocking at the door trying to get in, and all your ideas are great. And then if you move into an environment where suddenly all the doors are open, same ideas are taken and run with, because you're in, and that everyone's open to the idea. So, going in at that global direct level was incredible.
That sounds amazing.
And I learned so much. And the learning bit of the journey is a big part of it, because if I think back to when I ran my own PR company, I didn't know anything, really. On day one, I said, so what's PR? To my business partner, who had run record labels and worked for Left Field and done some pretty good stuff in dance music. I was just like, so what are we doing? At that point, I kind of knew that my studio journey was over. So he was like, do you want to come and help me do this? And I'm like, yeah. And literally on day one, it was like, okay, so we made it up. I've made it up nearly all the way through. And when I remember that feeling when I went to Boozy and Hawks, is I actually want to learn from people that know what they're doing, and I want to see what it's like. And Boozy had an amazing team of people, and I learned a lot. And then but the next level was Sony, where you're like, oh, okay, this is what it's like.
What would you say were two of the biggest things you learned when you were at Sony EMI? Like your eyes got open to what?
The way the business works and the way you're viewed, your credibility in terms of what you do is definitely linked to the success that you're aligned to, right?
Got it.
And that, it's like I say, you can have the best ideas in the world, but be on the outside knocking at the door. It's hard. It's not, it's not a reflection of your ideas. It's a reflection of your connections and how to get heard. And now, being on the other side, it's very hard to be open and talk to every single composer that writes to you, because you get a lot of, so that whole kind of, I sent demos and no one listens to it. Whilst as an independent, you'd be like, well, I can manage the demo flow of what I get received, because, I'm not getting inundated. When you go into a major, you're talking about, tens of demos a day. And that's not your job is not necessarily to just listen to new aspiring artists or whatever it is. So I think that just that association, but then just the brains, just the minds, the lawyers, the thought process around, I had the good fortune of being in Sony Music Publishing as digital licensing really came to be, and Facebook and Netflix, all of those things all of these platforms that are just in everyone's consciousness now were just starting to be licensed. So the thought process and the push and pull between the tech companies and the music companies on how things will be licensed. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I wasn't privy to the in-depth conversations there, but just talking to the lawyers that were, and just understanding the thought process and the aim, the goals to achieve, just helps increase your thinking of like how the industry works and how music works within, how as a consumer, you're listening to music because you like it. But how the business of music works is a difficult thing to understand, in the sense of the push-pull of what an artist wants, what the publisher or record label want, what the consumer, what the audience wants, how you license within. If you think about that time from when I was a record promoter, predating Napster, there's an industry that's built around physical product and distribution and shops, and everyone has to go and consume them. If they're not listening on radio, they're going to a shop and buying a product and going home and listening to it. And you think about that today, you've got your streaming services, and no one really very rarely goes and buys a physical product, right. And everything is just on your phone instantly. That means that the whole distribution network, the whole way the industry was set up, has had to massively evolve in the last 25, 30, tops 30 years, right? All of that's happened. And the thinking behind it, the impressive thing is the collection of brilliant people that think about how to navigate and be creative in this, and how to build a new industry in that sense, right?
It had to evolve.
How to evolve.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So you're at EMI how long? How many years?
7 years.
Oh, it is the 7 year. We go to 7 years.
Roughly.
Now, you always, throughout all the years with seeing you at APM dinners and stuff, there was always a nice relationship. There was always a nice rapport between you and the owners of Sonoton, Gerhardt and Heidi Narholz. And that turned into something else. How did that happen? And it actually necessitated you moving from the UK now to Germany.
To Munich,
Yeah, to Munich. So how did that transition for you occur? And how long did you think about that? Like, do I want to go to Germany and run this?
Well, I think there's two things, or maybe there's probably more things than that, but there are two key things that kind of stand out. Is when I got my brief kind of with, when I went into EMI, Sony had taken over the management of EMI. The production music department, the production music business, has been a market leader since the 1960s. Probably certainly in the UK, the most famous catalogue since the 1960s. And but there was some discord going on in terms of the department and who was there and people leaving and everything because of this big management shuffle. EMI had been through several iterations of ownership and change, and it's a very disruptive time. So I went in and kind of had to rebuild, and employ kind of. I had some brilliant people there, but some stayed, some went, and we had to kind of rebuild the team, especially around music production, which is okay because it's kind of my comfort zone. So we rebuilt. We kind of rebranded. We digitized the entire archive, which hadn't been done, and there's a lot of money locked in that. We did a load of things, and the business was, strong, and the business was strong always anyway. But the tweaks we made and everything, we grew and grew and grew, and everything was great, But the last couple of years of me being there, I'd been talking to my boss at the time about, well, kind of what's next. There's that kind of 7-year-ish kind of subconscious thing where it's kind of like, well, what's next? What's next? I've had the career in commercial music. I've done all of these things. I've kind of fallen into library music, which has been really kind to me and really, really good. But kind of, I can't imagine myself doing this for another 20 years until I retire, kind of thing. And there's kind of like, we've got a plan, you have an idea for you. And then things didn't kind of pan out that way. And my boss left and went to head up another major. And
the boss at EMI left.
Yeah. Okay. So a guy went and he's at Warner's and I was kind of like, okay, well, what now? Just built this great rapport and great relationship. And a new boss came in, who's brilliant, really cool, really nice guy. But a year into that relationship, I was kind of like bringing up the same subject. Well, what's next for me? And it was kind of like, well, we want you to focus on what you're doing. And it was kind of like, well, that doesn't really excite me. So I started to started to kind of talk to some people and go, I'm wondering what's next for me, right? And long story short on that one, I got a really good offer from someone that I knew really well, and it would have ticked a lot of boxes for what I wanted, and it would have also possibly meant I could come and live over in California for a bit, which is something I really wanted to do. And I wanted to do it, but I couldn't really, for one reason or another, struggled to get out of my contract. And at the same time, I had this long relationship with Heidi and Gerhardt because I'd represented them when I was running Boozy and Hawks. They represented my catalogues. And then when I went to EMI, we digitized a whole load of the archive, and it so happened that there were about 400 Gerhardt Narholz tracks in the archive because he had built a German library that was being sold to EMI. And so we were always in dialogue. And, I'd gone and hung out with them for a bit. They had gone on family holidays because they're lovely people. And, we'd gone to Austria to visit them, And so we had a good work relationship, but also there was a personal connection. And then, they'd always talked about, well, one day we'll need to find a successor or we need to do something else with the business. And so as I got closer to taking the job that I'd been offered, I thought, well, the right thing to do just from a friendship point of view, is to go and see them and say, look, I'm going to do this job. I've been offered a job. It's really cool. I really want to do it. I'm thinking of doing it, but if I do it, that takes me out for probably another 7 years.
Another 7 years.
So if you were thinking, because they'd never explicitly said they wanted me to do anything with Sonoton. I was like, but if you were thinking of me as maybe the person to come in and run the business, you better tell me now. And that was a dinner and they kind of looked at each other, and their eldest son Christoph was there, and it was like the answer came back, yes, we want you to do this. So
fantastic.
Then I had a difficult choice to make, but because of contractual stuff and then COVID hit, I had to let go of the opportunity to go and do the thing in America, and Sonoton became the choice.
Right. And I'm always fascinated by those moments in life where there's a fork in the road, and you almost have to start making lists. Like, okay, what's good about this one? What's good about this one? And that decision-making process, part of this podcast is about making human connections in this increasingly digital world and AI doing its thing. And humans make decisions for a variety of reasons, emotional or financial, and it's sometimes it doesn't seem so rational, the decision that was made, but we get faced with these choices, and it's fascinating.
Yeah.
All the way up at the tippy top, you're high up in the executive world of this industry, and whoops, there's a fork, and you're like, which one do I do?
Yeah, I kind of fork on my own doing, because I think that, pros and cons list is the most natural, obvious thing to do, right? And the other component part of that, I think I said that there's two kind of, so one of them was me kind of agitating to do something else, and maybe more in commercial music. And the other bit was, I remember a cold, wet day in South East London where I was living, where I grew up, and I watched an old person hunched over a walking stick, walking across the crossing. I had driven, I was in my car and I'd pulled up to stop at a crossing because this person had crossed the road. And it was a horrible day, really wet and cold, and and I'm like, I watched this old person walk across the road, and I just thought, I don't want to be in that position, and I've only really known living here.
I see.
Right, and that was the catalyst to go So I was, from a career and day-to-day job point of view, I was kind of like, okay, what's next? And from a life point of view, it was like, can I create, I have the privilege of going around the world for my business, right? But where would I want to be? Where could I go? What could I do? And that was a kind of, I went back, talked to my partner, and said, look, we had 3 young kids at that point, and I was just like, I need to go and live in another country. I need to experience life in another country. And bless her, she was like, yep, let's do it.
Wow.
Because she was dealing with 3 young kids in London, school runs and all of that stuff. Right. It's hard, it's a grind, right? Absolutely. You can get in the car, much like LA, you can get in the car, and if you miss time, you're sitting in the car for an hour on a 10-minute journey, right? And,
absolutely.
It's just like, she was like, yeah, I'm done with this. So let's explore what's possible. So then, to finish that thread, you kind of like, okay, so then there's 2 opportunities, but one of them is probably better for my family, and one of them is probably better for my career in music. And one of them ticks a box that I want to get more back into commercial music, and one of them's going deeper into the library world, right? But some of the ideas I had for what I think a modern library should do is to be and behave more in a commercial sense, in terms of, library music, for everyone, listening, has never been sold commercially, but Spotify and iTunes, it's natural for us to put our music there because it widens the net, because lots of music supervisors and whatever find their music that way. But by default, you're then becoming a bit more commercial because your music's, for the first time, commercially available. That's right? So it was kind of like, well, how do we amplify that? How do we promote some of our artists? I was a record promoter. How do you promote some of your artists, right? How do you how can we get a bit better at that and behave a bit more like a commercial company? And does that satisfy me in my desires and what I want to do as a career? So it became that, and Heidi and Gerhard were very receptive to these ideas. And the whole Narhouse family were very receptive to these ideas of like, okay, we need to do a market development strategy and a market diversification strategy. We've got this asset, we sell it in one area, synchronization. How do we start to make money elsewhere with the same asset, with being the diversification bit, and the development being how do we become better and better at doing what we do in the synchronization area? So I kind of pitched them this idea and said, if you want me, I'll only come if you give me, if you back these ideas and we start to kind of, I think this is the antidote for the direction the market's going in terms of lots of broadcasters having their own publishing companies and starting to use less and less outside music. Nowadays with the onset of AI and what will happen there in generative AI, I think library music has always been quite anonymous, and I think you need to put more of a face behind it now. You need to have more of your composers willing to kind of talk about the music and promote themselves. You need more presence digitally. So, these are the ideas. And the Nilses were, very receptive to this, very supportive. So the choice became quite natural. Because because they're a family and they know my children and my partner, and there was very much kind of like, okay, this, the jump into another country scratches that itch for me. The fact that we're going somewhere that's friendly, that knows that's all about family, means that I'm not leaving my family behind to pursue my career, in isolation, which can be the case if you're a high up executive. You're traveling a lot, you're doing a lot of stuff, and you can't always bring your family along for the ride. And so these things became the decision making. The decision became clearer because of that.
My experience with the Narholes family that started Sonoton back, it's the 60-year anniversary.
60 years this year, anniversary.
Yeah. They were, after I did my first production, and it wrapped up in early 1998, Gerhard was so kind. He called me from Austria to tell me he enjoyed the production. And I had never experienced anything. I had never gotten a phone call from Austria before. And Gerhard and Heidi came to New York City, and they insisted that we get together for dinner. And so my wife and I drove up from Washington, D.C. and met them in New York. And we were just blown away. And they were just so gracious that way. So I can see them being so supportive of your family and that whole situation because they just are that way.
Yes.
So
no, I mean it made the transition really easy.
That's
and
great.
it is a change, moving to a country, especially moving to a country you don't speak the language, and in the middle of a pandemic where everything's locked down.
Small problems.
These are tiny problems to overcome, and it was made easy.
Yeah.
Because it was because I've never had to. I work hard, and that's a given, right? Sure. But it's never an expectation to kind of, well, you need to finish this now so you can't go home and see your kids and put them to bed. There's not, and I'm not saying when my time in any of my business is particularly like that, but there is when you're working for a big corporation, you need to work. If you want to succeed and want to rise, you need to be focused and dedicated and put in a good shift. Right. And it's not about putting in long hours. It's about doing everything you need to do that day, and not just going, oh, I'm going home now because it's 5 o'clock. I'm going, regardless of all the open loose ends that I haven't. That's the way I approach work. So by default, you kind of end up some bits of your personal life are sacrificed in the pursuit of, because you love what you're doing and you're working hard. And that, in the environment I'm in now, being a family business, the the family are along for the ride in that sense. I mean, they will still grumble that I'm too busy and I don't pay enough attention to, but I don't feel any pressure from above. I don't feel any pressure from the company.
That's amazing.
And any expectation to kind of, and that's an amazing place to be.
That's great. We're almost, I think, done with our time. I know you have meetings that are waiting for you. So the future, you are at the helm of a very large company that is dedicated to this industry. If you had 1 or 2 points of what you think is in the future with the AIs and just the incredible volumes of music that are out there and the way AI is changing, and what do you see as the challenges? What do you see in the next 5 years for our industry?
Well, that's another podcast, isn't it? I mean, that's not a.
I figured I would just
wrap-up,
I would give you a doozy right at the end. No, look, if it's too much, take any part of that question you want.
No, I think.
But what are your big challenges today? How about that? Is that a fair?
The biggest challenge, certainly, like a company that's 60 years old that has been very focused. Gerhard Narholz in the 50s and early 60s was a commercial composer writing pop hits in Germany, but also in the UK. And then he went into film composition, and it was his smart thinking about, like, I'm spending 2 months to write a score or whatever for a film, and that film at the time, don't forget, no DVD, there's no VHS video, no Betamax. For the older viewers.
For the older viewers.
There was none of that, right? So, he was like, I was spending 2 months to make a score or whatever, and the film would be in the cinema for 3 weeks, and then and then it's gone, right? So he very smartly kind of kept his rights and started to say, well, can I keep the music and use it again? And then he built the library from that, and he was the first one in Germany. The KPM was existing in the UK. And there were a few libraries dotted around, but he was very early in that thinking of like, I want to keep my rights, I want to reuse them. But, for the 60 years of us doing music for TV, that's what we've done. So we've not really, we've not done the commercial thing, we've not tried to get an audience, we've not tried to make music popular in the commercial consumer sense. We've focused on making music, sending it to television, film and advertising. And I think that the biggest shift, I've felt this for a few years, which predates the kind of all the hype around AI, that, as I think I said it earlier in the podcast, at library, the composers that contribute to library music are largely anonymous. I got into it convincing my clients who are commercial composers to write under pseudonyms, so they didn't have to affect their own artist.
Their other
name,
livelihood.
Right. But they could write under a pseudonym. But all I wanted was their good music, But they didn't have to use. We didn't have to use their artist name. We didn't have to trade that way. And I built my career convincing well-known or talented, successful commercial writers to come and write for us as well, as a side hustle or whatever.
Quiet, quote unquote quiet,
yeah,
whatever that means.
And in the last few years, it's been actually, our music supervisor clients are looking at the popularity of someone's social media, or they find the music and they go, oh, I really like this, but how do they do on Spotify or whatever? And all of these things are starting to play into choices. People, the choices that our clients make. And that's completely natural, completely human way of, music's subjective, and everyone's looking for kind of like, oh, I like that, but what do other people think? That's, and then one of the benchmarks is, well, how many monthly listeners did I have on Spotify is an obvious one. We do that when we're commissioning composers. If we don't know anything about the composer, it's one of the first things to do. It's like, well, where do they sit within the digital environment?
Right. Do they have an audience?
Do they have an audience already? So you look at that and go, that's the big change. It's like we have to shift from we make music and send it to TV, to we make music and now we have to start to promote ourselves more. We have to start to build channels, and the great thing about the landscape now it's not very expensive / free to have a YouTube channel and then put some branding and advertising around it and have social Meta channels and TikTok channels. So now we can self-serve a little bit. So the biggest change is that shift in mindset and go, well, can we carry some of our composers? Are composers willing to start to put their face out there and help promote and push? So that is the shift, right? If we can start to behave in a different way, still make the music we make, still try and get it as many TV placements around the world as we can. But if we can start to amplify our music and our artists and start to help that in that digital ecosystem, their profile and presence, then as AI comes in and as there are other challenges within sync licensing and different business models competing with us and everything, then the bigger our brand is as a company, the more well known it is as a business, and the bigger or more established some of our composers are in terms of their popularity and success, the better our chances are to keep engagement with our clients.
Yeah, I see the same thing for Little Epic Score. Part of the reason of this podcast is for personalizing Epic Score and connecting with the audience in ways that, this is still relatively new. Me being in front of the microphone as opposed to the guy behind the recording console, the mixing console. We're having the same thoughts. So
I think the last bit, the antidote to what's coming down the track in terms of the potential for people to self-serve with generative AI music, I think it's a natural that we're gonna lose some of our business and there's going to be erosion within our client base. There's going to be some clients that are attracted to this and some types of usage. I don't necessarily think it's going to be in mainstream scripted and films. I don't think that that's necessarily going to be a problem in the future. But in other types of media creation and certainly UGC and all of that, the likelihood is that there's going to be some erosion there in terms of people migrating to Gen AI tools and whatever. And the antidote to that, we deal with largely majority of our revenue around the world is mainstream B2B professional media creators, and I think part of my thought process is we need to tap into humanity more. We're always going to be human-made composition. We're not going to flirt around the edges with that area because we're 60 years old. We've got 60 years of human-made composition. There's no point in really pivoting to the new shiny thing because it undermines our whole business model in terms of copyright and how rights protection is.
So you're comfortable with what you are, and you're gonna go down that road because you are, in some cases, when you're as large as Sonoton is, you are what you are to a certain extent, right?
Yeah, but I think I suppose that what I'm saying with the antidote is we're going to double down on, we manage ourselves in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and we have partners around the world for the rest of the world who represent and sell us. But in our home territory, we're going to double down on contact. We're going to be more present. We're going to double up on our service to our clients. We're going to be more attentive. And to me, those are the shifts, that I think we have to be more proactive.
Right. So in this increasingly digital world, you have to make almost a more purposeful push to the human side.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very valuable lesson in all of this. So I want to thank you for sitting with me today. I know you're very busy.
Pleasure, Gabe.
And I've enjoyed this so much. And come to Colorado and we'll hang out.
We'll race cars.
Race cars. That could be fun too.
It's joyful, to talk about this stuff. And I think what you're doing is brilliant.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And maybe we'll do it again at some point or maybe I'll come visit in, Germany? I guess I have to visit Germany now, not England.
Well, you could do both.
That's fine. Well, great.
Cool.
Thank you.
Pleasure.